A cold January morning in 1945. The headquarters in Versailles, France. Two of the most powerful military minds in the Allied forces are about to face off, and one of them is about to get demolished. I'm talking about the day when the usually calm, collected Supreme Commander of Allied forces lost his patience completely. The day he looked a legendary British Field Marshal straight in the eyes and delivered an ultimatum that changed the course of World War WWII command structure forever. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this private meeting in a nondescript office was more significant than any battlefield victory. You'll see how one conversation ended a months-long power struggle that was literally tearing the Allied command apart from the inside. And here's the thing, most history channels completely ignore this story. But it's the moment that defined how coalition warfare actually works when egos collide with authority. If you want to discover the untold confrontation that shaped Allied victory, subscribe now, and let's dive into this explosive piece of history. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, known as Monty to his friends, was without question one of the most talented tactical commanders of the entire war. He'd proven himself in North Africa, outsmarting Rommel at El Alamein. He'd planned and executed D-Day's ground invasion with meticulous precision. His troops trusted him completely, and his battlefield instincts were virtually unmatched. But here's what made him incredibly dangerous to the Allied cause. Montgomery was also impossibly arrogant. He couldn't shake the belief that he alone possessed the military genius necessary to win the war. He was convinced, utterly convinced, that he should be running the entire European campaign, not just a portion of it. After D-Day, Montgomery initially commanded all Allied ground forces during the invasion's critical early days. But when Supreme Commander Dwight Eisenhower decided in September 1944 to take direct control of ground operations himself, something inside Montgomery snapped. From that moment forward, Montgomery became a persistent headache for Eisenhower. He constantly questioned Eisenhower's broad front strategy, which involved pushing all Allied forces forward simultaneously rather than concentrating everything for a single decisive thrust under Montgomery's command. He lobbied British Prime Minister Winston Churchill constantly, trying to get the command structure changed. He gave press conferences that subtly suggested American commanders weren't up to the job. He treated American generals like Omar Bradley and George Patton with barely concealed contempt, as if they were incompetent subordinates who needed British supervision to accomplish anything. The tension was building, everyone could feel it, and then came December 1944. The Battle of the Bulge changed everything. When Hitler's unexpected offensive shattered American lines in the Ardennes, Eisenhower made a tactical decision. He temporarily placed two American armies under Montgomery's command for operational efficiency. This was a practical wartime decision, nothing more, nothing less. But Montgomery interpreted it completely differently. He saw it as vindication, as proof that American commanders couldn't handle crisis situations without British oversight, as evidence that he was the only one capable of leading the Allied war effort. And then, on January 7, 1945, Montgomery made a catastrophic mistake. He held a press conference where he essentially claimed credit for saving the American forces from disaster. According to his version of events, American troops had been in complete disarray until he rode in on his white horse and stabilized the situation. American generals were absolutely furious. Omar Bradley, one of the most respected American commanders, threatened to resign rather than serve under Montgomery again. George Patton, never known for diplomatic restraint, reportedly wanted to challenge Montgomery to a duel. The Anglo-American alliance, which had held together through years of war, was suddenly fracturing at its highest levels. Eisenhower knew he had to act, not next week, not tomorrow, now, the exact date, officially unrecorded. Because what happened in that room was so explosive that putting it in writing would have caused an international incident. But here's what we know. It happened in mid-January 1945, just days after Montgomery's disastrous press conference. Multiple sources, Eisenhower's naval aide, Harry Butcher, his chief of staff, Walter Bedell Smith, and later accounts from British officers who heard secondhand all confirm the essential details. According to Butcher's diary, Eisenhower prepared for this meeting by telling Smith something he'd been thinking for months. "I'm done being diplomatic with Montgomery. If he can't accept my authority, then he can go home." Smith, who had spent months dealing with Montgomery's constant complaints and power plays, apparently replied, "About damn time, sir." When Montgomery arrived at Eisenhower's headquarters expecting yet another strategic discussion, perhaps another opportunity to push his case for leading the final push into Germany, he got something completely unexpected. He got Eisenhower at his absolute breaking point. The meeting lasted roughly 30 minutes. No official transcript exists. But based on accounts from those who received briefings immediately afterward, we can reconstruct what happened with reasonable confidence. Eisenhower didn't waste time with small talk or pleasantries. He went straight to the heart of the matter. He started with Montgomery's press conference. Your remarks to the press have caused serious damage to Allied unity. American generals are furious. American newspapers are calling for your dismissal, and I'm not sure I disagree with them. Montgomery tried to explain that he'd been praising American troops, that the press had misunderstood his intentions. Eisenhower cut him off immediately. I don't care about your intentions. I care about results. And the result is that you've made Americans question whether this is truly a partnership or whether they're just here providing men and material for British glory. Then Eisenhower delivered the line that must have hit Montgomery like a physical blow. You seem to believe you should be running this campaign. You've made that clear in every conversation we've had since September. So let me make something equally clear. You're not running this campaign. I am. And if you can't accept that, I'll ask Churchill to relieve you of command. Montgomery attempted to protest, to explain his strategic reasoning, to argue why his approach was superior. That's when Eisenhower delivered the legendary line that would be whispered about in military circles for decades. Eisenhower stood up from his desk. He looked Montgomery directly in the eyes, said words to this effect. The exact phrasing varies in different accounts, but the meaning is unmistakable. Montgomery, I'm going to say this once, and I need you to understand that I mean every single word. Reservation. Stop lobbying Churchill for my job. Stop criticizing American generals. Stop giving press conferences that undermine Allied unity. Second, you can refuse and I will personally request you relief from command. Those are your only options. Shut up or get out. The phrase, shut up or get out, didn't originate with Eisenhower. It came from Churchill himself, who'd used similar language when warning Montgomery about the damage his press conference had caused. Now Eisenhower was delivering the same message with the full weight of Supreme Allied command behind it. But Eisenhower wasn't finished. He added something that made the situation even more devastating. I need to be clear about something else. The American Army is now the dominant force in this theater. We're fielding more divisions, providing more equipment, and taking more casualties than Britain. That's not a criticism, it's a fact, and it means American concerns carry weight. When American generals tell me they can't work with you, I have to listen. When American newspapers question the alliance because of your statements, I have to respond. Then came the most cutting part of the entire confrontation. You're a brilliant tactician. No one disputes that. But you lack political judgment, and in a coalition war, political judgment matters as much as tactical skill. I've defended you repeatedly, the slapping incidents with Patton, your slow advance at Kane, countless complaints from American commanders, but I can't defend you anymore, not after this. According to accounts from those present, Montgomery went pale. He had never been spoken to like this, not by Eisenhower, not by anyone. Montgomery tried one final time to salvage his position. I was merely trying to give an accurate account of the battle. The northern sector was under my command. I had operational control. Eisenhower's response was ice cold. I don't care. This isn't about operational details. This is about whether you understand your role in this alliance. You're not the supreme commander. You're a subordinate commander, an important one, a valuable one, but a subordinate nonetheless. And if you can't accept that role with grace and humility, then you're no longer useful to me. Out his exact requirements going forward. You will coordinate with Bradley as an equal, not as a superior. You will stop lobbying Churchill for command structure changes. You will clear any press statements through my headquarters before making them, and you will conduct yourself in a manner that reinforces Allied unity rather than undermining it. If you agree to these terms, we'll move forward together. If you don't agree, I'll speak to Churchill this afternoon and request your relief. The decision is yours, and I need an answer now. Montgomery had no real choice. He knew Churchill wouldn't support him, not after the damage his press conference had caused. He knew the Americans held all the leverage now, and he knew Eisenhower meant every single word. You have my full cooperation. Eisenhower studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Good. Then we understand each other. This meeting is over. After Montgomery left, Eisenhower reportedly sat in silence at his desk for several minutes. Then he turned to Bedell Smith and said, I should have done that 6 months ago. Smith agreed. The British won't like it. The British will understand it, Eisenhower replied. Churchill already understands it. That's why he won't fight me on this. And Eisenhower was absolutely right. When Churchill heard about the confrontation, news traveled quickly in those circles. His response was characteristically pragmatic. According to British records, Churchill told his military chiefs, Eisenhower has asserted his authority. About time, I'd say. Montgomery needed to hear it. But the real proof of Eisenhower's total victory came from Montgomery's subsequent behavior. Montgomery sent a letter expressing full confidence in Eisenhower's leadership and pledging complete cooperation. The letter was stiff and formal, but it was a public acknowledgement of Eisenhower's absolute authority. More importantly, Montgomery's influence over American forces effectively ended that day. For the rest of the war, Montgomery commanded British and Canadian forces in the northern sector, but he had no say over American strategy or operations. When American forces prepared to cross the Rhine, Montgomery wasn't consulted. When the final push into Germany was planned, Bradley and Patton had direct access to Eisenhower, while Montgomery received his orders like any other subordinate commander. The demotion was subtle but unmistakable. Montgomery had been put in his place, and everyone in the Allied command structure knew it. So why does this confrontation matter? Why should we care about a private meeting between two generals 80 years ago? Because it reveals something absolutely crucial about leadership and coalition warfare, something that applies just as much today as it did in 1945. Sometimes diplomacy fails. When it does, you need the courage to exercise raw authority. Eisenhower had spent years, really managing egos, mediating disputes, and keeping the alliance together through patience and compromise. He'd absorbed criticism, deflected blame, and made himself the target of complaints from every direction. He'd been the diplomatic unifier, the coalition builder, the patient architect of Allied cooperation. But there comes a point when compromise becomes weakness, when patience becomes enabling, when diplomatic niceness allows toxic behavior to continue unchecked. His ego, his ambition, his inability to accept that Britain was the junior partner in this alliance, these traits had created a genuine crisis. American generals were threatening to resign. The press was questioning Allied unity. The command structure was becoming completely dysfunctional. Eisenhower recognized that maintaining the alliance required him to stop being diplomatic and start being dominant. He had to assert absolute authority even if it meant humiliating one of Britain's most famous generals and risking Churchill's displeasure. And it worked. Not because Montgomery suddenly became cooperative. He remained difficult until the war ended. But because everyone in the Allied command structure now understood that Eisenhower was truly in charge, that his authority was absolute, and that challenging that authority had real consequences. This confrontation also reveals the shifting balance of power within the Anglo-American alliance. In 1942-1943, when America was still building up its forces, British commanders like Montgomery could exercise considerable influence over Allied strategy. Churchill could push back on American proposals. British military experience and resources gave them significant leverage. But by January 1945, that balance had shifted completely. American forces outnumbered British forces 3-1. In text est. American industrial production was supplying not just American armies but British armies as well. American casualties were mounting far faster than British casualties. The political reality was simple. America was now the dominant partner, and Britain was the junior partner. Montgomery's inability or refusal to accept this reality had made him a liability. Eisenhower's confrontation was essentially the moment when this new reality was made explicit and non-negotiable. It wasn't just about Montgomery's behavior. It was about establishing that American leadership of the alliance was absolute. Churchill understood this, which is why he didn't fight Eisenhower on it. The British Prime Minister knew that maintaining the alliance required accepting American dominance, even when it meant one of Britain's most famous generals being firmly put in his place. Montgomery never forgot that confrontation. In his post-war memoirs, he was notably restrained in his criticism of Eisenhower, unusual for a man who was generally quite free with his criticisms of everyone else. And when asked about it years later, Montgomery would say only that Eisenhower made his authority clear and that he respected the chain of command. But those who knew Montgomery recognized this uncharacteristic humility for what it was, the mark of a man who'd been definitively defeated in a contest of wills. Eisenhower, for his part, rarely mentioned the confrontation publicly. He understood that maintaining good post-war relations with Britain required not humiliating Montgomery unnecessarily. In his own memoirs, Eisenhower is diplomatic about Montgomery's contributions and carefully avoids detailing their conflicts. But in private conversations, Eisenhower was more candid. He told one aide that the confrontation with Montgomery was one of the hardest things I had to do during the war, but also one of the most necessary. He added, "I liked Monty in many ways. He was brilliant, dedicated, and genuinely cared about his men, but he couldn't see beyond his own ego, and in a coalition war, that's disqualifying." January 1945. In a private office in Versailles, Ike stopped being diplomatic and started being dominant. He told Bernard Montgomery, in effect, if not in exact words, "Shut up or get out." It was the moment when patience ran out and authority had to be asserted. The moment when coalition warfare gave way to unambiguous command. The moment when the greatest American general of World War II made it clear that Allied unity mattered more than British pride. Montgomery stayed, but from that day forward his influence was finished. Eisenhower had won not through brilliance or popularity, but through the raw exercise of authority when it mattered most. And the lesson remains relevant today. Sometimes leadership requires setting aside diplomacy and making absolutely clear who's in charge, even if it means telling your most difficult subordinate to fall in line or get out. The story revealed a side of Eisenhower you never knew existed. Hit that like button and drop a comment below. Was Eisenhower right to confront Montgomery in such stark terms, or should he have handled it more diplomatically? And what do you think Montgomery should have done differently? Subscribe for more explosive historical confrontations that changed the world. We bring you the untold conflicts, the private meetings, and the moments when history hung in the balance every single week.